This segment of the news is brought to you by Smitty's Cards and Coins. Would you like to know what your collectibles are worth? Come by 2281 Postal Road, Unit 4, across from the post office.
In this week's court report, the Pahrump man who pleaded guilty after being arrested and charged with lewdness with a child under 14 has now been sentenced. Robert Lee Fortner was in custody when he appeared for his sentencing, but received probation. Fortner molested a juvenile at an area home, and that young female victim told police that the then 20-year-old defendant touched her breast and rubbed her vagina. Fortner even corroborated what the juvenile said following his arrest. During sentencing for that incident, Fortner's attorney, Eunette Gentry, reviewed the defendant's lack of criminal history and argued in support of Fortner being placed on probation. Then the court admonished Fortner in regard to his actions and sentenced Fortner to 96 to 240 months in prison, suspended with 5 years of probation, with all the special conditions and standard fines and fees. Shauna Lee Gibbons now has an arraignment hearing scheduled in District Court April 28th after a couple of the various charges connected to allegations against her were bound over to the higher court. During the District Court proceedings coming ahead, Gibbons will answer to the charges of luring a child and indecent or obscene exposure. The 47-year-old Pahrump woman was arrested after being accused of attempting to lure children into her vehicle at Ian Dortch Park and allegedly exposing her breast. In the lower justice court, Gibbons currently has one remaining formal companion case charge, loitering where children congregate, and has a status hearing regarding that October 4th. Mark Kirby, the Pahrump father, accused of child abuse and other related charges, had his preliminary hearing, which was set for last Thursday, continued to June 1st. Kirby was taken into custody at Home Depot after police received a report of an adult male repeatedly striking a juvenile male, Kirby's 14-year-old son. Witnesses say they observed Kirby strike the underage child at least 6 times, then yell at him, stop, then strike the boy 4 to 5 additional times in the face. The child even had blood coming out of his nostril, on his lips and teeth, and on his forehead, along with a slight bump. During their investigation, police also discovered previous instances of violence involving Kirby's son, including allegations of being strangled, headbutted, and threatened. Kirby's 16-year-old daughter also told police the suspect previously headbutted and threatened her. Kirby currently faces a total of 10 charges with different dates of occurrence, including 8 counts of abuse, neglect, or endangerment of a child, assault with a deadly weapon, and coercion. Kirby remains in custody, $50,000 cash or bond. The man accused of armed robbery at the Green Valley Grocery on East Highway 372 had his arraignment in District Court continued again to May 13th after a previous continuance due to an error in paperwork. Dominic Arcangelo Coco's unusual case was originally dismissed in District Court without prejudice, then was sent back down to Justice Court. Coco previously told the state he did not commit the crime he's accused of, and then supposedly identified the real alleged robber. This has been your court report. I'm Eunette Gentry for News 46.
Thanks, Eunette. The Nye County Sheriff's Office is now working with the donor registry to ensure your final wishes are carried out.
April is National Donate Life Month, and this year the Nye County Sheriff's Office partnered with the Nevada Donor Network, who is kind of our regional donation service organ procurement organization for Nevada. Pam Starr and Monica Miles created a class that we taught to every officer here at Nye County. In Nye County, officers act as coroners and investigate deaths, so we're in a position where we can make information available to people. Hospitals are required to make notification to organ procurement organizations about people that pass away in the hospital. When these deaths occur outside of the hospital, which is what we commonly encounter, those a lot of times slip through the cracks, and the families or the person misses out on the opportunity to make that donation.
This helps out for people who wanted to donate originally and they didn't pass away inside the hospital. So you guys contact the donor registry, right?
The purpose of the training that we gave this year was to bridge that gap so that those notifications can be made. And our role is to notify the donor network when we do investigate a death that fits within the criteria, and then they can go through the process of checking the registry to make sure that to see if a person is on the donor registry, or even contact the family and see if the family wants them to be donated.
What's the criteria?
So tissue can be donated up to 24 hours after death. Organ donation is a little bit more complicated and is typically done after some hospitalization because it has to be done concurrent with a legal brain death where the organs are still essentially alive and can be harvested that way.
If you or your family members would like to find out more about the organ donation, how can they do that?
They can find out more or even register to vote through nvdonor.org. They can also call 855-NV-DONOR, and on the iPhone, the health app, you can actually register to be a donor on the iPhone health app. Approximately 40% of those eligible to be donors in Nevada are registered as donors.
Is that through the DMV when you get your driver's license?
Correct. So in addition to going to Nevada, nvdonor.org, or calling the phone number, or using the iPhone app, you can always register at the DMV. There's a myth that people believe that if you're a donor, the emergency responders won't work as hard to save you in an emergency situation, and that's completely untrue. If you register through the DMV, you do get that notification on your driver's license that shows that you are a donor, but if you register some of the other ways, there would be no way even for an emergency responder to know if you're a donor at that point.
A lot of people worry about when they're in the hospital if you would do all sorts of life-saving techniques to save your life if you're a donor.
Every person would get the same level of care regardless of whether or not they're the donor. The purpose for all emergency responders and medical staff is to preserve life, and if they have a situation immediately in front of them, they're going to preserve that life first.
Well, it's springtime, and that means lots of critters are coming out to get warm. Vince Payne from Nye County Emergency Services spoke to us today about how to protect yourself from some of those creatures.
It's been warm enough and the sun's been bright enough that we're starting to see a lot of snakes. One of the animal control officers was telling me the other day they've had about a half dozen poisonous snakes that they've taken possession of right here in Pahrump over the last few weeks. In particular, one of the earliest ones out is sidewinders. This is a little unusual, but they actually got a Mojave green the other day.
He relocates them, right?
Where you can. The Mojave greens are so dangerous that unless one of the colleges is looking for some, the safest thing to do for the community is to destroy them. However, the sidewinders and any of the other in the rattler family, we relocate them.
We got bees?
Bees, again, it's that time of year where beehives will do what they call swarming. Swarming is when the queen, the hive actually splits in two. They'll be looking for a new queen. Professional beekeepers prevent that from happening by implanting a new queen on a regular basis. However, in the wild setting, the bees around here, they'll go looking for a new queen, and they do a thing called swarm. That's when you see them like hanging on a tree or up against a building, and it's a great big ball of bees, a swarm.
And so typically they only hang out for a couple days and then they move on.
That is correct.
What should you do?
Where possible, just leave them alone. If it's on your house, like on your porch, if you have another door that you can go in, just leave them alone, and they'll leave you alone. Use the other door. If it's in an area where people are going to be directly affected, and again, you have to use a little bit of common sense because this is not an easy process, then they would have to be destroyed by one of the pest control companies. But again, the best thing to do is leave them alone, and within 24 to 36 hours, they're going to leave on their own because all they want to do is find a new home.
And so you need to watch out if you're especially out hiking around for the snakes that might be out. I've heard some calls, some snakes in people's yards and stuff, and they typically call animal control.
Yes, that's correct. Fortunately, the snakes, they don't want anything to do with us if they can avoid it. So if you give them some room and some distance, they'll move on. When animal control gets these calls, better than 50% of the time they're gone by the time they get there because they're just moving through. So where you can, leave them alone. And then again, for hikers or even in your own yard, Be aware that poisonous snakes are pretty hard to see sometimes, especially in the desert. Just give them a little berth and all will be well.
Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's tax day. Tax returns are due today. If you owe any money from last year, you need to file your taxes and have them in the mail or get an extension to avoid getting penalized. If you don't do either, you will get a failure to file penalty, a failure to pay penalty, and interest rates on the amount you owe beginning tomorrow. If you can't pay everything you owe at once, the IRS has payment plans available. The IRS gave us 3 extra days this year to file taxes because the usual day, which is the 15th, fell on a Saturday.
And stay tuned, we'll have even more local news ahead after this break.